Don't you ever touch my child. You, this barren woman. Do you know what it means to give birth?
I never believed that the happiest day of my life and the worst day of my life could be just 18 months apart. Until they were. Until I was standing in my mother-in-law's living room, in front of her friends, her sisters, her pastor's wife, and my own husband, with tears running down my face, and nobody in that room standing up for me. My name is Grace, and I need to tell you what they did to me. I met Daniel at work. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic. We were just two people working at the same telecommunications company in Lagos, sitting 3 desks apart, eating lunch in the same cafeteria every day, until one afternoon, he sat across from me and said, "You always eat alone. Is it by choice or by circumstance?" I looked up from my jollof rice. Why? Because if it is by choice, I respect it. If it is by circumstance, I would like to change it. I laughed, not because it was the smoothest line I had ever heard, it was not, but because there was something so straightforward about him. No pretending, no packaging, just honesty sitting there across from me like a man who had nothing to hide. His name was Daniel Adeyemi. He was 31. He was from Ibadan. He had a deep voice, a quiet confidence, and a habit of arriving everywhere 5 minutes early that I found both impressive and slightly annoying. We became friends first, lunch friends, then evening walk to the bus stop friends, then talking on the phone until midnight friends. Then somewhere between all of that, something shifted, something warm and quiet and undeniable. He asked me out on a Tuesday evening, sitting in traffic on the Third Mainland Bridge, both of us stuck in a downfall that smelled like sweat and old rubber. He just turned to me and said, "Grace, I like you. I have liked you for a long time. I just want you to know." No pressure, no performance, just truth. I said, "I know, I like you too." And that was that. We dated for 2 years, 2 real years, the kind where you see each other tired and stressed and broke and still choose to stay. He met my mother in Benin City, my small, quiet mother who had raised me and my younger brother alone after our father left. She made him pepper soup and watched him eat, and afterward told me, "He is a good man. You can see it in how he eats. No wastage, no complaint." That was her way of giving her blessing. I met his family in Ibadan. His father, a retired teacher, his younger sister, Sandra, who was sweet and loud and immediately made me feel welcome, and his mother, Mrs. Victoria Adeyemi. She was a tall woman, sharp eyes behind expensive glasses, the kind of woman who dressed like every day was a function, even when she was just sitting at home. She shook my hand and smiled at me and said, "So, you are the one our Daniel cannot stop talking about." I smiled back. I thought she liked me. I was wrong. We got married 14 months later. The wedding was not extravagant, but it was beautiful. A church ceremony in Lagos, yellow and gold decorations, 200 guests, my mother crying from the front row, Daniel holding my hands at the altar with that steady, calm look in his eyes that always made me feel safe. Mrs. Adeyemi danced at our wedding. She sprayed money on my head. She hugged me and called me her daughter. I have a video of it on my phone. I have watched it many times since then, trying to find the lie in her face, trying to find the moment when the mask slips. But she was convincing. She was completely convincing. We moved into a flat in Lekki. Daniel worked. I worked. We were building something real, something ours. 3 months into our marriage, I got pregnant. Daniel held me in the kitchen when I showed him the test and said nothing for a long time. Then he whispered, "Thank you." Just that, like I had given him the world in my hands. I called my mother. She screamed so loud I had to pull the phone from my ear. I called my mother-in-law. She said, "Okay, we will pray." Not congratulations, not excitement, just "okay, we will pray." I told myself she was just a reserved woman. I told myself I was reading too much into it. I was happy, Daniel was happy, my mother was happy. That was enough. But then I lost the pregnancy at 11 weeks. And that was when everything changed. The miscarriage was quiet and devastating, the way only women understand. One day there was a heartbeat, then there was not. I lay in that hospital bed and stared at the ceiling and felt something hollow open up inside my chest, a grief that did not have words, only weight. Daniel was there. He held my hand. He did not try to fix it with words. He just stayed. But his mother came to the hospital and stood at the foot of my bed and said, "These things happen, but you need to go and check yourself. Some women have problems they do not know about." I stared at her. She said, "I'm just saying, better to know early." Daniel told her to stop. She said she was only trying to help. She left 30 minutes later, and the room felt both emptier and lighter at the same time. That night, alone in the dark, while Daniel slept, I cried. Not just for the baby I lost, but because something told me, quietly, in the way your body sometimes knows things before your mind does, that this woman was not going to make my life easy. I just didn't know how hard she was prepared to make it. If you have ever been humiliated by someone who was supposed to love you, keep reading, because what happened next broke me in ways I am still learning to name. 6 months after the miscarriage, I was pregnant again. I did not tell anyone immediately, not even my mother. Daniel and I kept it between us for the first 8 weeks, going to antenatal appointments quietly, daring to hope carefully, the way you do when you have already known loss. At 10 weeks, the doctor smiled at us and said, "Strong heartbeat, everything looks good." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. We told the family. My mother cried again. Daniel's father called and prayed on the phone for 20 minutes straight. Sandra sent a voice note screaming for so long it cut off mid-sentence. Mrs. Adeyemi said, "Good, make sure you are eating properly and resting. You women nowadays do too much." I let it go. But then things started. Small things at first. She would call Daniel, not me, always Daniel, with concerns. Is Grace resting enough? Grace should not be going to work in her condition. Has Grace seen a specialist? Not just a regular doctor, a specialist. Some women have weak wombs. It is not something to take chances with. Weak womb. She used those words on the phone, and Daniel told me, and I felt something cold move through me. But Daniel told her to stop worrying, that the doctors said everything was fine, and for a few weeks things went quiet. Then came the Sunday. It was supposed to be a simple family lunch. Daniel's mother had invited some of her friends, women from her church, her age group, and a few family members, his aunt, his cousin, normal Sunday afternoon in Ibadan. We drove up from Lagos on Saturday evening. I was 4 months pregnant, tired but happy, wearing a loose yellow dress that showed just the beginning of my bump. Daniel held my hand the whole drive. When we arrived, the house was already full. Music, laughter, the smell of egusi soup and fried fish from the kitchen. Women in asoebi sitting in the living room. Everyone greeted us warmly. I sat down, accepted a bottle of water, and felt for one dangerous moment like maybe I had been wrong about this woman. Maybe she was warming up. Maybe this was her way of celebrating. Then she came and sat down in the center of the room, and she said, loudly, clearly, in a room full of people, "Let us just pray that this pregnancy stays because the last one could not hold." The room went quiet. Someone coughed. I felt Daniel go still beside me. She continued, as if she had said something reasonable, as if she was just being practical. "I have been asking around, a woman who loses her first pregnancy like that, especially so early, there are things that need to be checked. There are women who cannot carry. It is not their fault, but it is the truth." I looked at her. She was looking at her friends, performing. That was the only word for it. She was performing concern while doing something else entirely. One of her friends, a large woman in a purple blouse, shook her head slowly and said, you cannot know these things until God reveals them. Another one said, let us hope for the best. And just like that, a room full of people had accepted the idea that I might be a woman who could not carry a child while I was sitting right there, 4 months pregnant, with their grandchild, their nephew, their cousin's baby growing inside me. I turned to Daniel. He was looking at his hands. He said nothing. I stood up, excused myself, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the tub and shook. Not cried, just shook. The kind of trembling that happens when your body absorbs something your mind is refusing to process. I sat there for 11 minutes. I counted. Then I washed my face. I dried it. I looked at myself in the mirror and said quietly to my own reflection, do not fall apart here, not here. I walked back out. I sat down. I smiled. And I made a decision, not out of pride, not out of anger, but out of something quieter and more certain, that I was going to survive this woman. What I did not know was how much worse it was going to get before heaven answered.
This is the chapter I almost did not write. Because some pain is so private, you feel like putting it in words will break you all over again. But I am writing it because I know someone reading this has lived something like it. And I need you to know you are not alone. I want to pause here and ask you something. If this story is hitting close to home, if you have ever felt alone in a marriage, unseen in a family, or humiliated by someone who should have protected you, please subscribe to this channel because we tell stories here that remind you that you are not crazy, you are not weak, and your story is not over. Now, back to Daniel. My husband was not a bad man. I want to be clear about that. He was not the kind of man who raises his hand or screams or comes home smelling of other women. He was kind. He was responsible. He was genuinely good in all the ways that are easy to be good. But he had one weakness, his mother. Not love for his mother. Love is healthy. Love is right. But something else. A fear, maybe, or a debt he felt he owed her that I never fully understood. When she was in the room, something in Daniel shifted. He became careful, measured. He would not challenge her, would not correct her, would look at his hands or his phone or anywhere else when she said something that should have made him speak. I had seen it before. I had felt it before. But the night it truly broke me was a Tuesday, 6 months into my pregnancy. We were in our flat in Lekki. It was late, past 10. I had finished eating, cleaned the kitchen, and was sitting on the bed rubbing shea butter on my stomach the way my mother had taught me, talking softly to the baby the way first-time mothers do when nobody is watching. Daniel's phone rang. He stepped into the sitting room to take the call. I did not think anything of it. But then the call went on, and I started to hear the shape of it. Not the words, but the tone. His voice low and careful. The occasional silence where someone was speaking at length on the other end. After 20 minutes, he came back into the room. He sat on the edge of the bed with his back to me. My mother called, he said. I know. She wants us to go and see a specialist, a fertility specialist. She has already made an appointment. In 2 weeks. He paused. In 2 weeks. I stopped rubbing my stomach. Daniel, I said slowly, I am 6 months pregnant. I know. I am already seeing a doctor, a good doctor. Everything is fine. I know that, Grace. Then what is this appointment for? He was quiet. And that silence, that horrible, cowardly silence told me everything. His mother had put an idea in his head, an ugly, poisonous idea, that maybe I was the problem, that maybe the miscarriage was a sign of something deeper, that maybe even with this pregnancy progressing well, maybe there was something wrong with me that needed to be investigated, confirmed, documented. She wanted evidence of my deficiency. and my husband, my good, kind, responsible husband, was sitting on the edge of our bed, unable to look at me, considering it. "Are you serious right now?" My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Grace, she is just worried." "She is not worried about me, Daniel." I sat up straighter. "She has never been worried about me. She is worried about you, about your name, about your lineage. She wants to find out if I am the broken one, so she has a reason." I stopped. I could not finish that sentence. "A reason for what?" he said. "You know what?" He turned to look at me then, and I searched his face for the man who had sat in traffic on the Third Mainland Bridge and told me simply, honestly, that he liked me. That man was still there. I could see him, but he was buried under something: duty, fear, habit, and he did not know how to dig himself out. "I am not going," I said. "I am not going to a fertility specialist while I am 6 months pregnant to satisfy your mother's suspicion. I will not do it." "Daniel." "No." We did not speak for the rest of that night. He slept on his side of the bed, I slept on mine. The space between us felt like a country. In the dark, I put my hand on my belly and felt the baby move, a small rolling press against my palm, and I whispered, "I am going to be okay. We are going to be okay." I did not fully believe it yet, but I was learning to say it, because sometimes you have to speak the thing before you can feel it. The fight became quiet after that. Not loud, we were not loud fight people. Ours was the kind of conflict that lives in sighs and short answers and conversations that end too soon. His mother called 3 times a week. Sandra, bless her, called me separately to check in and once whispered, "I know my mother is being difficult. I'm sorry, Grace. She is who she is." I appreciated Sandra more than she ever knew. But the worst moment, the one that cracked something fundamental in my chest, came 2 weeks before my due date. Daniel's mother arrived at our flat unannounced. She had taken a bus from Ibadan without telling anyone. She stood at our door with a small bag and said she had come to help prepare. I let her in because what else does a pregnant woman do with her mother-in-law at the door? She moved around our kitchen inspecting things, rearranged the baby items I had organized in the small room we had converted into a nursery. She commented on what I was eating, how I was sitting, whether I was doing my antenatal exercises. Then that evening, while Daniel was in the bathroom, she sat down across from me in the living room and looked at me in a way that made my skin tighten. "Grace," she said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." "Okay," I said carefully. "Is there anything in your family history, anything health-wise that Daniel should know about, that we should know about? Because I've been asking questions, and someone told me that in your mother's family." I stood up. "Mrs. Adeyemi," I said. My voice was shaking, but my eyes were not. "I don't know what someone told you about my mother's family, but my mother raised 2 children alone, without help, without complaint, and she did it with her full body and her full health. Do not come into my home and investigate my bloodline." She blinked. "I'm just asking." "I heard what you are asking." Daniel turned out of the bathroom and stopped when he felt the temperature of the room. His mother looked at him, and then she did something I was not prepared for. She started to cry. Sometimes, God's silence is not abandonment. Sometimes, it is preparation. She cried beautifully. That is the only way I can describe it. Controlled, dignified tears, the kind that made her look wounded rather than guilty. She said she was only trying to look out for her son, that she had not meant any harm, that I had misunderstood her, that she was an old woman who loved her family and all she wanted was grandchildren, and why was that a crime? Daniel held her. He held his mother and rubbed her back while she cried. And I stood in my own living room, 38 weeks pregnant, and watched my husband comfort the woman who had spent the last 9 months trying to make me feel like I was defective. I walked into the bedroom. I closed the door. I sat on the floor. Not the bed, the floor. And I put my back against the wall. And I pulled my knees as close to my chest as my belly would allow. And I stayed there in the quiet. And I said one sentence to God. "If you are real, please show up.
because I am running out of ways to hold this together. That was all. No long prayer, no list of requests, just that. 3 days later, Mrs. Adeyemi went back to Ibadan. 4 days after that, I went into labor. It was not an easy delivery. 12 hours, the kind that breaks your understanding of what your body can survive. Daniel was there the entire time, holding my hand, and somewhere around hour 10, something cracked open between us, all the silence and distance and unsaid things, and he looked at me with wet eyes and said, "I am sorry, Grace. I am so sorry I did not protect you the way I should have." I was in too much pain to answer, but I heard him. At 4:47 in the morning, my son was born. They placed him on my chest, this small, warm, breathing person, and everything in the universe rearranged itself around that moment. The weight of him, the sound of him, the absolute, unreasonable, immediate love that hit me like a physical thing. Daniel was crying. I was crying. The midwife was smiling, the tired smile of someone who has witnessed miracles enough times to still be moved by them. I looked down at my son, his face scrunched and perfect and new, and I whispered, "Hello, I have been waiting for you." We named him Elijah. Daniel called his mother from the hospital. She said she was happy. She said she was coming. She arrived 2 days later with bags of provisions and new baby clothes and a wide, warm smile. And this is the part of the story where I tell you that I wish I could say everything healed quietly and simply after that Elijah's arrival softened her completely, that we became the family I had hoped for. But the truth is messier than that, and you deserve the truth. Elijah was 3 months old when my neighbor, a soft-spoken woman named Mrs. Fashola, who lived 2 flats below us, knocked on my door one afternoon while Daniel was at work. She stood in the doorway with a strange expression, uncomfortable and determined at the same time. "Grace," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to sit down first." I sat down. 2 Sundays ago, she said, I went to a women's fellowship meeting at Victory Tabernacle. You know it, on the main road. And I saw a woman there, your husband's mother. I recognized her from your wedding. I nodded slowly. She was speaking to the women during testimony time. Mrs. Fashola paused. She was choosing her words carefully. She was telling the women about her son's marriage. She said, another pause. She said that her son's wife had nearly destroyed their family with her barrenness, that the first pregnancy was lost because the wife had a spiritual problem, that she had prayed and fasted and practically forced God to keep the second pregnancy. She was taking the credit, Grace. She stood in that church and took the credit for your baby. The room was very still. She told those women that you are a difficult woman, that you had a proud spirit, that if it were not for her prayers and her intervention, her son would have had no child. I did not move. I filmed part of it, Mrs. Fashola said quietly, because something told me you needed to know. She held out her phone, and there, on a small screen, in my neighbor's hand, was Mrs. Victoria Adeyemi, standing before a church full of women, speaking about me, about my body, about my marriage, about my son, twisting every painful thing I had endured into a story where she was the hero and I was the problem that God had graciously overlooked. I watched the whole thing without saying a word. Then I thanked Mrs. Fashola. I closed the door. I sat on the kitchen floor, the same way I sat on the bedroom floor 9 months ago. And this time, I did not cry and I did not pray. I just made a decision.
They laughed at the wrong woman, and heaven was watching the whole time. I did not confront Mrs. Adeyemi immediately. I know that might surprise you. After everything, the humiliation, the appointment, the crying performance in my living room, and now this video, you might expect rage, action, a dramatic confrontation. But I had learned something important in those 12 hours of labor. I had learned that the most powerful thing I possessed was not my anger,
it was my steadiness. So I waited. I prayed, and I showed Daniel the video. I sat him down on a Sunday evening while Elijah was sleeping. I placed the phone in his hand. I said, "Watch this." And then I left the room because I did not want to watch him watch it. I did not want to manage his reaction while processing my own pain. I went to the bedroom and sang softly to Elijah until I heard Daniel's footsteps. He stood in the doorway. His face was different. Something had shifted in it permanently. I could see it. The careful, managed, eyes downcast expression he had carried for so long was gone. In its place was something rawer, clearer. "How long have you had this?" he asked. "A week." "Why didn't you show me immediately?" "Because I needed to know what I was going to do with it, and I needed to make sure I was not doing it from anger." He sat on the edge of the bed. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I owe you more apologies than I know how to give." "Yes," I said, simply, "you do. I kept choosing peace over truth, and I kept making you pay for it. Yes, I am going to fix this, Grace." "Daniel," I said carefully, "I do not want a war with your mother. I want a marriage with you. But I cannot have a real marriage while she is standing in the middle of it, rewriting our story to strangers. That has to stop. Not because I want revenge, because Elijah deserves to grow up watching his father protect his mother." He nodded. "I will handle it," he said. What happened next I was not there for. Daniel has told me the full story, and I will tell you what I know. He drove to Ibadan the following Saturday, alone, no warning. He arrived at his mother's house while she was having tea with two of her friends, the same women who had been in the living room the day she performed her tears. He greeted everyone calmly. He sat down. He asked the friends to excuse them. When they were alone, he played the video. He let it finish. Then he said, "Mama, that is my wife you are talking about. That is the mother of your grandson. And everything you said in that video is either a lie or a private thing that was never yours to share." She started to speak. He held up his hand, gently but firmly. "I am not here to argue. I am here to tell you one thing clearly so that there is never any confusion about it again. Grace is my wife. She is not a problem in my life. She is my life. And if I ever hear from anyone that you have spoken about her that way again, I will not be bringing Elijah to this house. Not for Christmas, not for Easter, not for any occasion. That is not a threat, Mama. It is a boundary. And I should have set it a long time ago. I am sorry that I did not." He told me she was very quiet after that. Maybe because there was no audience. Maybe because somewhere beneath the pride and the control, she recognized truth when it was finally spoken to her directly. She called me 4 days later. I almost did not pick up, but something, instinct, grace, stubbornness, I am not entirely sure, made me answer. "Grace," she said. "Mrs. Adeyemi?" A long pause. She stopped, started again. "I did not treat you well. I know that. I have been sitting with it for 4 days and I cannot find a way to excuse it." A long pause. "I was afraid. I know that's not a good enough reason, but Daniel is my only son and I was afraid of losing him to a woman who would take him away from me. And instead of trusting him, instead of trusting God, I made you the enemy, and you are